Ruth couldn't remember my name the day she died. But 3 years before that, when her mind was still sharp, she walked into a jewelry shop in Savannah and set a trap for our own daughter. I didn't know any of this until her locket disappeared from my nightstand and a woman I'd never met called me. "Mr. Calloway, there are coordinates hidden inside your wife's locket. She said you'd understand." I didn't. Not yet, but I was about to. Hello everyone, thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I truly enjoy reading your stories. Just a quick note, some parts of this story are creatively adapted for reflection and learning. Any similarity to actual people or places is unintentional, but the message behind it may stay with you longer than you expect. The phone rang at exactly 14 minutes past 2 on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the living room of our house on East Gaston Street in Savannah, sitting in the same leather chair I'd occupied every day since Ruth passed away. 16 months of the same routine, 16 months of reaching for a hand that wasn't there anymore. Ruth's chair sat across from mine, angled toward the window the way she liked it. The cushion still held the shape of her. I hadn't moved it, hadn't touched it. Some mornings I'd look up from my coffee and swear I could see her there, reading glasses low on her nose, a library book open in her lap. The locket catching the light that came through the garden window. The locket. That small piece of white gold she wore every single day for 30 years. Heart-shaped, delicate, on a chain that had been replaced twice but never the pendant itself. Inside, 2 photographs so small you needed steady hands and good light to see them. Our wedding day, August 14th, 1976. And Brenda, our daughter, the hour she was born, August 30th, 1980. Every morning since Ruth died, I'd reach over to the nightstand and touch that locket. It sat on a small porcelain dish beside her reading glasses and the lavender hand cream she used every night before bed. Touching it was my way of saying good morning, my way of telling her I was still here. That Tuesday I reached over. My fingers found the dish. The glasses were there. The hand cream was there. The locket was not. I sat up, checked the floor, pulled the nightstand away from the wall, checked beneath the bed, behind the lamp, inside the drawer. Nothing. I went through the bedroom methodically, the way 30 years of firefighting had trained me. Systematic. Every surface, every corner, every place a small piece of jewelry might have fallen or been set down. The dresser, the windowsill, Ruth's vanity table with its oval mirror and the faint smell of her powder. Nothing. I stood in the center of the bedroom, heart pounding. And that's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Savannah. Area code. I almost let it ring. Most calls these days were either people selling something or people wanting something. I had very little left to give of either. But something tightened in my chest. A feeling that sat between instinct and dread. I answered. "Hello? Is this Edward Calloway?" The voice was female. Older. Careful. Like she was choosing each word before she said it. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Calloway. My name is Doris Whitfield. I own Whitfield & Sons Jewelers here in Savannah, on Broughton Street. I'm calling because your wife asked me to." I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed. My legs had gone soft. "My wife passed away 16 months ago. I know, Mr. Calloway. I'm very sorry." Ruth and I knew each other from First Baptist. 30 years in the same congregation. Paid me in advance. Gave me very specific instructions. Instructions for what? "Your daughter came into my shop yesterday. Her and a man. They sold me a locket. White gold, heart-shaped pendant, 2 photographs inside. I paid them $5,000 for it." The room tilted. I gripped the bedspread with my free hand. "That's not possible," I said. "That locket is upstairs in this bedroom. It's been on my nightstand since Ruth died." Doris was quiet for a moment. Then, gently, Mr. Calloway, I think you should check again. I just checked. It's gone. I thought I'd misplaced it. You didn't misplace it, Doris said. It was brought to me by a woman who identified herself as Brenda Calloway Marsh. She said it was her mother's, and she had permission to sell it. I couldn't breathe. Brenda, my daughter, my only child. That can't be right, I whispered. Ruth anticipated this, Doris continued. She told me exactly what to do. Buy the locket immediately. No questions. No haggling. Then call you. I stood and walked to Ruth's vanity table. The small wooden jewelry box sat where it always had, centered on the lace doily Ruth had crocheted herself. I reached for the lid. It didn't open smoothly. I looked closer. The brass lock was damaged. Scratches, fresh ones. Bright metal showing beneath decades of patina. Someone had forced it open. Not with a key. With something thin and flat, a butter knife maybe, or a screwdriver, careful enough not to break the box, not careful enough to hide the marks. I opened the lid. Ruth's wedding ring was there, the one she'd stopped wearing when her fingers swelled from medication. Her pearl earrings from our 25th anniversary. A silver charm bracelet Brenda had given her when Brenda was 10, back when Brenda still made gifts by hand and wrote "I love you, Mommy" on construction paper cards. The space where the locket should have been was empty. It's gone, I said into the phone. The lock's been forced. Doris exhaled slowly. I was afraid of that. Ruth prepared for this, Mr. Calloway. She paid me 4 years ago. Told me exactly how to respond when this happened. Why would she expect this? She didn't explain everything, but she told me there was something you needed to see. Something hidden inside the locket. Hidden? There's a compartment in the pendant. Very small. I'm the only one who knows how to open it. Ruth designed it that way. Doris paused. Inside that compartment, there are coordinates. Geographic coordinates. Your wife said you'd need them when your daughter made her move. I stood in the bedroom, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the empty jewelry box with its broken lock. Ruth had been gone for 16 months, but she was still here. Still planning. Still protecting me from something I hadn't even seen coming. What coordinates? I asked. I think it's better if you see them in person, Doris said. Can you come by tomorrow morning? My shop is at 412 Broughton Street. I'll have the locket ready for you. I wrote the address on the notepad beside the bed. Ruth's handwriting still filled the pages above mine. Grocery lists, doctor's appointments, library holds. The ordinary architecture of a life that had been quietly extraordinary. Before I go, Mr. Calloway, Doris said. Your wife told me something else. She said people would try to make you question yourself, that they'd tell you you were confused, that your memory was failing. But you're not confused. She said you'd need proof. And she spent her last clear months building it. My throat closed. She really said that? Word for word. I wrote it down the day she told me, so I'd get it right when the time came. I sat with the phone against my ear, listening to the silence on the line. Outside the bedroom window, the jasmine Ruth had planted along the garden fence was blooming. The smell drifted in through the screen, sweet and heavy in the August heat. Thank you for calling, Mrs. Whitfield. Doris, please. And I wish the circumstances were different. But Ruth wanted you protected. Whatever's happening now, she saw it coming a long time ago. The call ended. I stayed on the edge of the bed, holding the broken jewelry box in my hands. Brenda had been here. In this house. In this bedroom. She'd gone through Ruth's things and taken the one piece that mattered most. The locket Ruth wore every day for 30 years. The locket that held our wedding photo and Brenda's baby picture. The locket Ruth touched whenever she was worried. Whenever she was thinking. Whenever she needed to feel close to the people she loved. Brenda sold it for $5,000. And Ruth, my Ruth, had seen it coming. 4 years ago, while Alzheimer's was already beginning to shadow her mind, she'd walked into a jewelry shop and set a trap. Not out of anger. Out of love. The kind of love that doesn't just hold on, the kind that plans ahead, even when it knows it's running out of time. I looked down at the locket's empty space in the jewelry box. Tomorrow, I'd go to Doris's shop. I'd see the locket again. I'd find out what Ruth had hidden inside it, and then I'd begin to understand what my wife had built to save me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair beside the bed and stared at the jewelry box until the streetlight through the curtains made the scratched brass glow like a wound. After midnight, I got up and turned on the lamp. Bright light. No shadows. The lock was small, ornamental, the kind you'd find on an antique music box. Ruth had bought this jewelry box at a flea market in Thunderbolt when Brenda was still in elementary school. Paid $8 for it. The brass had aged well, darkened to a warm brown over decades, except where someone had scraped it. Those marks were bright, fresh. The metal underneath was almost yellow, untouched by years of air and humidity. Someone hadn't picked this lock. They'd pried it. Something thin and rigid. A flathead screwdriver or a letter opener, forced into the gap between the lid and the clasp. I could see where the tool had bitten into the wood along the seam, tiny splinters curling upward. Careful work. Not rushed. Whoever did this had taken their time. 30 years in the fire department teaches you how to read a scene. Where the fire started. Which direction it traveled. What accelerated it. This was the same thing. Someone had entered this room, forced this lock, and removed one specific item. They'd left Ruth's wedding ring, her pearl earrings, the charm bracelet Brenda made when she was 10. Only the locket was missing. I walked to the bedroom door and crouched down. A thin scratch on the doorframe just above the handle. Recent. The wood was lighter, where something had scraped it. But Brenda didn't need to force this door. She had a key. Ruth had given her a spare 5 years ago. Just in case there's an emergency. I went downstairs and checked the junk drawer. The hook labeled Brenda in Ruth's handwriting was empty. She still had it. I leaned against the kitchen counter, closed my eyes, and made myself think. When had she been here? Sunday. 3 days ago. Brenda came by around 1 in the afternoon. Said she wanted to check on me. Brought a peach cobbler she claimed she'd baked herself, though the aluminum pan had a public sticker on the bottom she'd forgotten to peel off. We'd sat in the living room. She'd asked how I was eating, whether I was sleeping, if I'd been keeping up with doctor's appointments. Normal questions. Concerned daughter questions. Kevin stayed in the car, she said. Wasn't feeling well. We'd talked for 20 minutes. Then she'd stood. Can I use your bathroom, Daddy? Of course, sweetheart. You know where it is. She'd gone upstairs. I'd stayed in the living room. Turned the television to the weather channel. 12 minutes. I remembered because the forecast had just finished when she came back down. Her purse was on her shoulder. It had been in her hand when she went up. She'd hugged me at the door. Pressed her cheek against mine. Love you, Daddy, she'd said. I'll come by again soon. And she'd walked out with Ruth's locket in her purse. I thought about the locket. 1993. Our 17th wedding anniversary. I was 43, pulling shifts at Savannah Fire Station 7 on East Broad Street. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. Ruth worked part-time at the Bull Street Library, shelving books, running the children's reading hour. Between us, we kept the lights on and Brenda in new shoes. But there wasn't much left over. I started skipping lunches in February. Walked to the station instead of driving, saved the gas money. Put every spare dollar in an envelope behind the spare batteries in the garage. Ruth never went back there. 8 months. $312. I took the bus downtown on a Saturday in October while Ruth was at the library. Went to 3 jewelry stores before I found the right one. A white gold locket. Heart-shaped, on a delicate chain, $308. I gave it to Ruth that evening after dinner. She opened the box at the kitchen table. The overhead light caught the gold. She held it in her palm and stared at it. Then she looked up at me, eyes full. "Ed," she whispered. "Open it," I said. She pressed the tiny clasp. The heart swung open. 2 photographs cut to size. Our wedding day on the left, standing on the church steps, young and certain. Brenda on the right, wrapped in a hospital blanket. Born on my birthday. Ruth put the locket on and never took it off. Not for 30 years. Not when she gardened. Not when the chain broke and had to be replaced. Not when the clasp wore thin and a jeweler resoldered it. The pendant stayed against her skin for 3 decades. I remembered our last anniversary dinner together. Fall of 2019. Before the diagnosis. That seafood place on River Street, with the checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Ruth wore her green dress. The locket rested against her collarbone, catching candlelight. She'd taken my hand across the table, and with her other hand, touched the pendant. "This locket holds our whole family, Ed," she'd said. Then she'd smiled. That particular smile, the one with a secret behind it. I'd laughed, thought she was being sentimental. She wasn't. She was telling me something I wouldn't understand for 6 more years. I sat in the dark living room, staring at Ruth's empty chair, and replayed Sunday. Brenda arriving with her store-bought cobbler, the concerned questions, the 12 minutes upstairs, the hug, the smile, the locket. Gone. She'd planned it, come over with a reason, gone upstairs with a purpose, broken into the jewelry box with a tool she'd brought in her purse, taken the one thing Ruth treasured most, kissed my cheek, and walked out the door. My daughter. The baby in the locket photograph. The little girl who used to catch fireflies in the backyard and bring them to Ruth in a mason jar, glowing like tiny fallen stars. That girl was gone. I didn't recognize the woman who'd replaced her, but Ruth had recognized her. Years ago. And Ruth had acted. I pulled out my phone and stared at Brenda's name. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I could already hear her voice. Confused. Concerned. "Daddy, what's wrong?" And if I accused her, she'd deny it. Turn it around. Tell me I was imagining things. Doris said there were coordinates inside the locket. Something Ruth had put there 4 years ago while her mind was still clear. I needed to see them first. I needed to understand what Ruth had built before I confronted Brenda with anything. I set the phone down and looked at Ruth's empty chair. "What did you know?" I asked the quiet room. No answer. Just the clock on the mantel and the cicadas through the window. But tomorrow, I'd go to Doris's shop. I'd hold the locket again, and whatever Ruth had hidden inside it, I'd follow it. Because Ruth had never steered me wrong, not in 45 years. And I wasn't going to start doubting her now. I stood outside Whitfield & Sons Jewelers at 9:15 the next morning, staring at gold leaf lettering on a storefront that had been part of Broughton Street longer than I'd been alive. The sign above the door read, "Established 1952. Below it, hand-painted in smaller letters, 3 generations of trust. Savannah was already warm. August, heat pressed down on the sidewalk like a hand on your chest. Live oaks lined the block, Spanish moss hanging still in the heavy air. A couple walked past with coffee cups. Tourists, probably. Admiring the storefronts. Normal morning. Normal city. My life had stopped being normal 2 days ago. I pulled out my phone and searched the shop before going in. 4.9 stars. 312 reviews. Most trusted jeweler in Savannah. Fair appraisals. Immediate payment. Doris is the best in the business. Honest. Fast. Discreet. If someone in my family needed to sell jewelry quickly and wanted the best price without questions, this is where they'd come. A quick search, 5 minutes of reading reviews, and the decision would be obvious. Ruth had known that. She'd counted on it. I pushed the door open. A bell chimed, small and bright. The shop was narrow but deep. Display cases running along both walls. Vintage rings. Estate bracelets. Pocket watches. Pearl strands laid out on dark velvet. The air smelled like wood polish and metal, warm and old. At the back counter, a woman looked up from a magnifying lamp. Doris Whitfield, 71 years old, white hair pinned up in a soft twist, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck, silver earrings shaped like magnolia blossoms. She wore a cream-colored blouse with the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her hands were steady, jeweler's hands, precise and sure. "Mr. Calloway? Ed, please." She smiled, warm but careful. The smile of someone about to deliver something heavy. "Come with me, Ed." The back room was small. A workbench covered in tools, loops, polishing cloths. A safe in the corner. Door open. Doris reached inside and pulled out a black velvet box. My chest tightened before she even opened it. "Before I show you this," she said, settling into a stool across from me, "I want you to understand what your wife did." Doris folded her hands on the workbench. "Ruth came to see me in April of 2021. 4 years ago. She called ahead, asked if we could meet privately. I said of course. We'd known each other 30 years from First Baptist. Sat in the same pew most Sundays." She paused. "Ruth walked in that Thursday morning looking tired, thinner than I remembered. But her eyes were sharp, clear. She sat right where you're sitting now, and she told me she needed my help, and she needed me to keep it secret. She was already diagnosed by then," I said quietly. "Early onset Alzheimer's. Spring of 2020. She told me the doctors gave her maybe 2 or 3 good years before things got bad." Doris looked down at the velvet box. She said she was watching Brenda change. Questions about money, about your will, about the house. Ruth said Brenda's husband had lost his job and started gambling. She said Brenda was circling, her word. She said, "Doris, my daughter is circling my husband like he's something to be divided up." And then she told me what she wanted to do. Doris opened the velvet box. The locket lay coiled inside on dark fabric. White gold, heart-shaped pendant, the chain I'd seen against Ruth's skin every day for 30 years. My breath caught. I reached out and touched it. Cool, smooth, familiar. Like touching Ruth's hand in the dark. "She paid me $5,000 cash," Doris continued. "For the modification and for the buyback. She told me that when someone brought this locket in to sell, probably Brenda, probably within a few years, I was to buy it immediately. Full price, no negotiation, then call you. She was certain Brenda would sell it. She was certain someone would. And she knew they'd find my shop." Doris gestured toward the front. 4.9 stars. Top result on Google for Savannah jewelry buyers. Ruth checked. She sat right here with her phone and showed me the search results. She said, "When my daughter needs money fast, she'll look online. She'll see your reviews. She'll think she's being smart." Then Ruth looked at me and said, "But I'll have already set the trap." Quote, my throat tightened. Ruth. Sick, frightened, running out of time, and still 3 steps ahead of everyone. Doris turned the locket over in her palm. "Now let me show you what she had me do." She pressed her thumb against the side of the heart pendant, just below the hinge. A soft click. The back of the heart separated from the front, revealing a second compartment I'd never known existed. Thin, as a coin, perfectly concealed. Inside, engraved into the metal, in tiny, precise numbers. 30, 2.0809, -80, 1.09, 1, 2. Geographic coordinates, Doris said. I engraved them myself. Ruth drew the design. She wanted them small enough that no one would notice, even if they opened the locket. You'd have to know exactly where to press. I stared at the numbers. Where do they lead? She didn't tell me. She said you'd know when you got there. Doris reached into the safe again and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. My name was written across the front. Ruth's handwriting. Careful. Steady. the penmanship of a woman who'd spent decades shelving books and writing catalog cards by hand at the library. "She left this for you," Doris said. "Told me to give it to you after I showed you the coordinates." I took the envelope. Inside, a single card. Ruth's handwriting again. "Ed, go to the Oak. Everything starts there. I love you. R." I read it 3 times. Go to the Oak. The Oak. Which oak? Savannah was full of them. Hundreds of live oaks, draped in Spanish moss, lining every street, filling every square. But Ruth had written the oak as if there were only one, as if I should know. I looked up at Doris. "Did she say anything else?" Doris nodded slowly. "She told me one more thing. She said people would try to make you question yourself, that they'd tell you you were confused, that your memory was failing. She made me write it down so I'd get it right." Doris pulled a small notepad from her apron pocket, flipped to a page, and read aloud. "Tell Ed. He's not confused. He never was. I'm building him proof. By the time he needs it, I won't be able to explain it myself. So I'm leaving him a trail." Doris closed the notepad. Then she said something that stuck with me, Ed. She said, "I'm running out of time. Not because of Brenda, because of myself. The Alzheimer's is coming, and when it takes me, Ed will have no one. So I have to finish this while I still remember who he is." The room blurred. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. Ruth had sat in this chair 4 years ago, already losing pieces of herself, and she'd spent what was left building a fortress around me. Not with anger, with love. The kind that calculates, that prepares, that sacrifices the present to protect the future. I closed the hidden compartment, slipped the locket into my shirt pocket, and stood. "Thank you, Doris, for keeping your promise." "Ruth made it easy to keep," she said. "She was the most remarkable woman I ever knew." I walked out into the Savannah heat, the locket against my chest, Ruth's note in my hand. Coordinates that led to an oak tree. A message that said, "Everything starts there." And a dead woman's voice in my memory, steady and sure, saying she'd built me proof while she still remembered my name. The coordinates were in my phone. The oak was waiting. And whatever Ruth had buried beneath it, she'd put it there with hands that were already beginning to forget. But not yet. Not quite yet. 4 years before the call, on a Thursday morning in late April, Ruth Calloway walked into Whitfield & Sons Jewelers carrying a secret she hadn't told anyone. The bell above the door chimed. Savannah was blooming outside. Azaleas bursting pink and white along Broughton Street. The air thick with pollen and the faint sweetness of Confederate jasmine. Ruth paused in the doorway. She was 65, thinner than she'd been at Christmas. Her hair had gone silver at the temples, pulled back in a clip. Her dress was simple, navy blue, pressed. The locket rested against her collarbone the way it always did. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. The eyes of a woman who had counted her remaining good days and decided to spend them building something instead of grieving. Doris recognized her immediately. Ruth Calloway. Doris. Ruth's smile was genuine but brief. I called ahead. "You said we could speak privately." The back room door closed behind them. Ruth set her purse on the workbench, folded her hands, and looked at Doris with an expression that made the jeweler stop smiling. "I need your help," Ruth said. "And it stays between us. Not Ed, not Brenda, not anyone at First Baptist." She reached into her purse and pulled out the locket. White gold catching the overhead light. Doris turned it in her fingers. The metal was warm from Ruth's skin, worn smooth from 30 years of daily contact. "Ed gave me this in 1993, Ruth said. "Saved 8 months to buy it. $312. She touched the chain gently. "I need you to modify it. Add a hidden compartment inside the heart. Engrave coordinates inside. 32.0809. Negative 81.0912. Why coordinates? They lead to a place where I'm going to leave something for Ed. Something he'll need after I'm gone. The room went quiet. Through the door, Broughton Street hummed with ordinary life. A truck passing, a dog barking. Ruth's voice dropped. I was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's in spring of 2020. 13 months ago. The doctors say 2, maybe 3. Good years before things get bad. She said it plainly. Some days I already notice. Last week I drove to the library and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes because I couldn't remember why I was there. Doris reached across the workbench and covered Ruth's hand. Ruth let the touch sit for a moment, then continued. 6 months ago, Brenda started asking questions. About our finances, Ed's pension, the house, whether we'd updated our wills. Ruth's jaw tightened. Her husband Kevin lost his job. He's gambling online. $40,000 in debt. And Brenda's been looking at Ed like he's a problem to be solved. Ruth, are you sure? Ruth opened her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. I hid this behind the clock on our living room mantel in March. On the 15th, Ed went to the hardware store. Brenda and Kevin came over. They didn't know I was in the bedroom. She pressed play. Slightly muffled, but the words were clear. Brenda's voice first. We need to move faster. Dad's still sharp, but once Mom's gone, he'll be alone. That's when we file. Kevin. Quieter. The doctor thing is risky. Fleming's desperate. His son's got medical bills. 4,000 cash. He'll write whatever we want. Cognitive decline. Memory issues. Whatever it takes for conservatorship. Kevin again. What about the house? Brenda's voice turned cold and bright. First thing we sell. 400,000 easy. Pay off my car, your debts. Daddy won't even know what happened. Ruth stopped the recording. Her eyes were wet, but her voice held. My daughter is planning to steal my husband's life, she said. His house. His money. His freedom. She's going to bribe a doctor, file for conservatorship, and sell everything. Doris stared at the recorder. I can't tell Ed. Ruth continued. He'll confront her. She'll deny it. No proof. Just accusations. She'll turn it around. Make him look paranoid, especially after I'm gone. She'll say he's confused. Imagining things. Ruth placed both hands flat on the workbench. So, I'm building something else. She explained the plan. The hidden compartment with coordinates leading to a specific oak tree in Bonaventure Cemetery. A buried box beneath it containing a key. The key, leading to a safe deposit box downtown. Inside that box, everything Ed would need. Cash. Property deed. Recordings. Legal documents. A fortress built from the inside out. When Brenda needs money, Ruth said, she'll take this locket. She'll search online for the best place to sell it. Ruth pulled out her phone, showed Doris the screen. 4.9 stars. Top result in Savannah. She'll think she's being smart. But I'll have already set the trap. Doris looked at Ruth for a long moment. How long do you have to finish this? Ruth traced the locket chain on the workbench. Maybe a year. Some mornings everything is clear. Other mornings I stand in the kitchen and can't remember what I was doing. It comes and goes. But it's coming more often. She looked up. I have to finish while I still remember who Ed is. While I still remember what I'm protecting him from. She pulled out a white envelope. $5,000 cash. For the modification and the buyback. When someone brings this locket in, buy it. Then call Ed. Doris took the money. Ruth stood and held out her hand. Will you do this for me? I will. I promise. Ruth picked up her purse and walked to the door. She paused. One more thing. She handed Doris a cream-colored envelope. Ed's name on the front in careful handwriting. Give him this. After you show him the coordinates. What's inside? Ruth's smile was sad and proud. The beginning of the trail. And the beginning of his survival. She left. Doris watched her walk down Broughton Street. A 65-year-old woman in a navy dress, moving through spring sunlight, Spanish moss overhead, azaleas along the sidewalk. She looked like anyone's grandmother out for a walk. She wasn't. Ruth Calloway was fighting a war on two fronts, against a disease erasing her mind one day at a time, and against her own daughter, waiting for that mind to go dark. Ruth was losing the first war. The fog would come and stay, and eventually take her name and Ed's name and the reason she'd walked into this shop. But the second war, the one for Ed, she intended to win. By the time Alzheimer's finished what it started, the plan would already be buried in the earth, locked in a vault, hidden inside a locket that a woman with a fading mind had turned into a shield. Not to harm, to protect. The way she'd protected Ed for 45 years. The way she'd protect him from the other side of memory. I called Brenda at 6:30 that evening. "Come over," I said. "Both of you, Daddy." Her voice shifted immediately. Careful. Controlled. "Is everything okay? Just come." 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Brenda stood on the porch in a white blouse and pressed jeans, hair blown out, lipstick fresh, like she'd gotten ready for a performance. Kevin stood behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes already scanning the hallway behind me, looking for something, or looking for what was missing. "Daddy," Brenda said, stepping inside. She touched my arm. "You sounded upset on the phone. What's going on?" I didn't answer. I walked to the living room. They followed. I pointed to the couch. "Sit." They sat. Side by side. Brenda crossed her legs, folded her hands on her knee. Kevin leaned forward, elbows on his thighs. Both of them wore expressions of concern. Practiced. Symmetrical. I stood across from them, reached into my shirt pocket, pulled out the locket, set it on the coffee table between us. The white gold caught the lamplight. The heart-shaped pendant gleamed against the dark wood. Silence. Brenda stared at it. Her face didn't move, but something behind her eyes did. A flicker. Quick. Then gone. "Where did you find that?" she asked. Her voice was too even. Too measured. "You sold it," I said. "To Doris Whitfield. Whitfield and Sons Jewelers on Broughton Street. $5,000. Last Thursday." Kevin's jaw tightened. Brenda blinked once, slowly, the way someone does when they're choosing which mask to put on. "Daddy, I have no idea what you're talking about. You were here Sunday. You came upstairs. Said you needed the bathroom. You were up there 12 minutes. You broke into your mother's jewelry box and took her locket." I didn't take anything. I pointed at the locket on the table. The lock on the jewelry box was forced. Fresh scratches on the brass. "Your spare key is gone from the kitchen drawer. You still have it." Brenda uncrossed her legs. She looked at Kevin, then back at me. Her expression softened. Not with surprise, with something rehearsed. Pity. "Daddy," she said slowly, "I think you need to sit down." "I'm fine standing." She stood instead. Took a step closer. Her voice dropped to the tone people use with children and old dogs. Gentle. Patient. Suffocating. "You've been alone in this house for over a year. You're not sleeping well. You told me that yourself last month." She paused. "And Mom had Alzheimer's." "Daddy." The word landed like a stone in the center of my chest. "What does that have to do with anything?" I said. "It's hereditary sometimes. You know that." She took another step. Close enough to touch me now. "Kevin and I have noticed things. You forget where you put your wallet. You called Helen last month and asked where Mom was. That was one time. I was half asleep. You asked Helen where Mom was," Brenda repeated. "Mom's been gone 16 months. Kevin leaned forward. "We're not trying to upset you, Ed. But we've been worried. Little things adding up. The forgetting. The confusion. You left the stove on 2 weeks ago. Brenda found the burner still going when she came by. I hadn't left the stove on. I was certain of it. Almost certain. The doubt crept in like cold water under a door. Brenda put her hand on my shoulder. Daddy, what if you're starting to show early signs, like Mom did? My throat closed. The room tilted. For one terrible second, I wasn't standing in my living room. I was standing in the kitchen 2 years ago, watching Ruth open the refrigerator and stare at the shelves like she'd never seen them before, watching her mouth the words, "What was I doing?" to herself, watching the confusion cloud her eyes, the same eyes that had been sharp and bright and certain for 63 years. What if it was happening to me? There's no jeweler, Brenda said softly. There's no Doris. I think maybe someone called you and confused you. Scammers do that, Daddy. They target elderly people. They tell stories. They make you believe things that aren't real. I have her number, I said. My voice sounded thin, distant, like someone else was speaking. That could be anyone. Did you verify it? Did you go to the shop yourself? I had gone to the shop. I'd held the locket. I'd seen the coordinates. But standing here, with Brenda's hand on my shoulder, and Kevin nodding slowly and the word Alzheimer's hanging in the air like smoke, the certainty I'd carried all day began to crack. We love you, Brenda said. We're worried about you. Maybe it's time to talk to Dr. Fleming. Get a proper evaluation. Just to be safe. Dr. Fleming. The name from the recording. The doctor Brenda planned to bribe. She was already laying the foundation. Kevin stood. We just want what's best for you, Ed. I think you should consider whether you're still safe living alone, Brenda added. Her voice hardened just slightly at the edges. We can help arrange something, a place with more support. There's nothing wrong with me, I said. Then show me proof, Brenda said. Show me a receipt from this jeweler. Show me evidence that anyone sold anything. I stared at her. My daughter. The baby in the locket. The little girl who used to sit on my lap at the fire station and pretend to drive the truck. Get out, I said quietly. Daddy, get out of my house. Brenda held my gaze for 3 seconds. Then she picked up her purse and walked to the door. Kevin followed. At the threshold, she turned back. Her expression had changed. The pity was gone. Something colder had taken its place. We're going to help you, Daddy, she said. Whether you want it or not. The door closed. The house went silent. I stood in the living room, hands shaking, heart slamming against my ribs. Ruth's chair sat empty by the window. The lamplight caught the locket on the coffee table where I'd left it. I sat down in Ruth's chair for the first time since she died. Pressed my palms against my knees, closed my eyes. Brenda's words circled in my head like vultures. Alzheimer's. Confused. Not safe alone. Scammers target elderly people. What if she was right? What if I was losing it? What if Doris was a stranger who'd tricked me? What if I'd imagined the coordinates, the note, the whole thing? I'd been forgetting things. Small things. Where I put my keys. Whether I'd locked the back door. Last month I'd stood in the grocery store aisle for 2 full minutes trying to remember what I'd come for. What if this was bigger? I opened my eyes. The locket sat on the coffee table, gleaming. I picked it up. Pressed the side of the heart pendant. Click. The hidden compartment opened. The numbers stared back at me. Cut into metal. 32.0809. Negative 81.0912. Real. Engraved. Permanent. Not a dream. Not confusion. Not a scammer's trick. Ruth had put these numbers here 4 years ago. Doris had confirmed it. The compartment was real. The coordinates were real. The plan Ruth had built was real. I wasn't losing my mind. They were trying to take it from me. And for one terrible moment, standing in my own living room with my daughter's hand on my shoulder, I'd almost let them. That's what gaslighting does. It makes the ground under your feet feel like water. Makes you reach for something solid and grab nothing. Makes you believe the people hurting you are the only ones trying to help. I closed the compartment, set the locket down, looked across at my empty chair, the one I'd sat in for 16 months. Not anymore. Tomorrow, I'd follow the coordinates. I'd find the oak. And whatever Ruth had buried there, I'd dig it up with my own hands. The next morning started quietly. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the sun climb over the rooftops of East Gaston Street. The jasmine along the fence was heavy with blooms, the scent thick in the early heat. A mockingbird sang from the magnolia in the side yard. For 10 minutes, the world felt almost normal. Then Helen Prescott knocked on the screen door. Helen was 76, lived 3 houses down in the yellow Victorian with the wrought iron gate and the tabby cat that slept on the porch railing. She'd been our neighbor for 12 years. Good woman, kind heart. Talked too much. Ruth used to say Helen could fill a room with words the way the ocean fills a tide pool, gently and completely. George, honey, I just wanted to check on you. She stood on the porch holding a glass pitcher of sweet tea with lemon slices floating on top. Haven't seen you on your walks lately. Rough week, Helen. She stepped inside without being invited, the way neighbors do in Savannah, and settled into the kitchen chair closest to the window. I poured 2 glasses of sweet tea and sat across from her. We talked about nothing for a while. The heat, her cat's vet appointment, the new restaurant on Abercorn that she'd heard was overpriced. Then she said it. Now I saw Kevin posted some wonderful photos. Las Vegas. The Bellagio looked absolutely gorgeous. The glass stopped halfway to my mouth. Las Vegas? Oh yes. About a week ago, I think. Him and Brenda. They looked like they were having the time of their lives. Helen sipped her tea. Lord knows everyone needs a vacation now and then. Kevin had some lovely shots of the fountains at night. I set the glass down carefully. When exactly did they go? Well, let me think. Helen tilted her head. I saw the photos maybe 5 days ago. The post said they'd just gotten back. So it must have been the week before last? Right around the time Brenda brought you that cobbler. The numbers clicked together in my head. Brenda came to my house Sunday, August 10th. Took the locket. Sold it to Doris Thursday, August 14th. $5,000 cash. And flew to Las Vegas the same day. Helen left 20 minutes later. I barely heard her goodbye. The laptop sat on the desk in the living room. I hadn't touched it much since Ruth died, but I knew how to use it well enough. I typed Kevin's name into the search bar. His profile was public. Brenda's was locked down tight. Private. Careful. Controlled. But Kevin had never been careful about anything. Especially online. His page loaded. Profile picture of him leaning against a black BMW that was 2 months behind on payments. Cover photo of him and Brenda at some restaurant. Wine glasses raised. Smiles wide. The curated life of people drowning in debt. I scrolled down. And there it was, posted August 15th. The caption read, "Sometimes you just gotta let loose and live a little. Vegas baby." Followed by a string of emojis I didn't care to decipher. The photos loaded one by one. Kevin standing in front of the Bellagio fountains at night, arms spread wide, grinning like a man who hadn't gambled away his family's future. Brenda at a slot machine, cocktail in hand, laughing at the camera. A selfie of both of them at a buffet, plates piled high. Tickets to Cirque du Soleil, front section, held up to the camera like trophies. A short video of Brenda on the casino floor, spinning on her heel, the lights of 1,000 slot machines flickering behind her. I clicked on the timestamps. Posted August 15th, photos taken August 14th through 16th, 3 days. 3 nights in Las Vegas, starting the exact day they sold Ruth's locket. I leaned back in the chair. My hands were shaking, but not from doubt this time. From anger. Cold, focused anger that settled into my bones like winter. I opened a new tab and searched flight prices. Portland to Las Vegas, round trip, booked last minute. Roughly $400 per person. 2 people. 800. Hotel on the Strip for 3 nights. At least 500. Food, shows, gambling money. Another 700 minimum. I grabbed the notebook I'd been keeping on the kitchen table and wrote it down. 5,000 received from Doris. 2,000 for Kevin's gambling debts. He'd mentioned them at Thanksgiving last year. Tried to make it sound small. Just a rough patch, he'd said. Brenda had squeezed his hand under the table. 1,200 for the BMW payment. 3 months overdue. Brenda had complained about it at Easter, said the dealer was threatening repossession. 1,800 for the Vegas trip. Flights, hotel, food, shows, casino floor. Total. $5,000. Every cent. They'd taken Ruth's locket. The one she'd worn for 30 years. The one that held our wedding photo. And Brenda's baby picture. And they'd turned it into slot machines and buffets and fountain selfies. I stared at Kevin's caption again. Sometimes you just gotta let loose and live a little. Live a little. They'd stolen from me. Gaslit me. Called me confused. And then they'd sipped cocktails beside a fountain built to impress tourists. I printed the photos. All of them. The Bellagio. The slots. The buffet. The Cirque du Soleil tickets. The casino floor video. Frame by frame. I printed the flight date estimates, the hotel price ranges, Kevin's caption. I printed the timeline. August 10th. Brenda visits. Takes locket. August 14th. Sells locket to Doris. 5,000 cash. Flies to Vegas same day. August 15th. Kevin posts photos. August 18th. Doris calls me. August 19th. Brenda and Kevin sit in my living room and tell me I'm losing my mind. I laid everything out on the kitchen table. Not legal evidence. I knew that. A lawyer would look at vacation photos and shrug. There was no direct proof. The Vegas money came from the locket. Brenda could say they'd been saving. That Kevin got a bonus. That a friend loaned them cash. A judge wouldn't accept circumstantial timing. But this wasn't for a judge. Not yet. This was proof of who they were. Proof of what they'd done with Ruth's memory. They'd taken the locket that held our wedding day and our daughter's first breath. And they'd fed it into a slot machine at the Bellagio. I folded the printouts carefully and slid them into a large yellow envelope. Wrote evidence on the front in black marker. These photos would hold up in a confrontation. When the time came, when I had real evidence, legal evidence, I'd spread these photos on the table in front of Brenda and watch her face when she understood that I knew. Not suspected. Knew. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter beside the locket and Ruth's note. 3 pieces now. The locket with its hidden coordinates. The note that said, "Go to the Oak," and a yellow envelope full of casino selfies that proved my daughter had celebrated stealing from me. But first, the coordinates. First, the oak tree. Whatever Ruth had buried there, I needed it before Brenda's next move, because we're going to help you whether you want it or not wasn't a promise. It was a threat, and the clock was already ticking. 2 days passed. I spent them organizing. The yellow envelope with the Vegas photos. The locket in my shirt pocket. Ruth's note in my wallet. I wrote everything down in a notebook, dates, names, amounts, the way I used to write incident reports at the fire station. Clear. Factual. No emotion. Wednesday morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing the timeline when 3 sharp knocks hit the front door. Loud. Deliberate. Not Helen's gentle tap. Not a neighbor. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. A man in a gray suit stood on my porch. Mid-50s, thinning hair combed back, wire-rimmed glasses, polished shoes. A leather briefcase hung from his left hand. He looked like a man who charged by the hour and enjoyed every minute of it. Edward Calloway? Who's asking? He extended a business card. Martin Beauregard, attorney at law. I specialize in elder law and conservatorship cases. The word conservatorship landed in my stomach like a swallowed stone. What do you want? May I come in? This concerns your daughter, Brenda. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to shut the door. But I needed to know what they'd built. I stepped aside. Martin walked into my living room, sat on the couch without being invited, and set his briefcase on the coffee table. He opened it with 2 precise clicks and pulled out a folder. I remained standing. "Mr. Calloway," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "Your daughter has retained my services due to concerns about your capacity to manage your personal and financial affairs." "My what?" "Your cognitive capacity. Your ability to make sound decisions regarding your health, finances, and living situation." "There's nothing wrong with my capacity." Martin didn't react. He opened the folder and pushed the first document across the table. A medical report. Letterhead read, Marcus Fleming, M.D., Family Medicine, Savannah, Georgia, dated July 7th, 2025. 6 weeks ago, I picked it up. Patient presence with family concerns regarding memory and decision-making capacity. Daughter reports increased forgetfulness, confusion about dates, difficulty managing household tasks. Patient appears oriented during visit, but formal cognitive screening is recommended. My hands tightened on the paper. This is false. I never said any of these things to Dr. Fleming. The report documents family concerns, Martin said evenly. Your daughter contacted Dr. Fleming prior to your appointment and expressed worry. She lied to him. Martin pulled out a second document. A witness statement from Helen Prescott, your neighbor. Signed August 7th. I took it. Helen's signature at the bottom, neat and careful. The statement read, I have known Edward Calloway for 12 years. In recent months, I have observed concerning behavior. He frequently forgets appointments and has mentioned leaving his keys in unusual places. On one occasion, he asked me if I'd seen Ruth, his late wife, who passed away over a year ago. He seems confused at times and may benefit from additional support. My vision blurred. Helen hadn't said it like that. Not those words. Brenda must have sat across from her, asked leading questions, shaped the answers into something clinical and damning, then handed Helen a pen. Martin pushed a third document forward. The petition itself. Petition for conservatorship. Petitioner, Brenda Calloway. Marsh. Respondent, Edward Calloway. I read the grounds. Respondent exhibits cognitive decline, including memory loss, confusion, and impaired judgment. Respondent is unable to manage financial affairs and may pose a risk to his own safety. Petitioner requests full conservatorship of person and estate. Full conservatorship. My house. My money. My freedom. Every decision about my life. Made by Brenda. When was this filed? I asked. It hasn't been filed yet. Martin closed the folder. Your daughter wants to give you an opportunity to cooperate voluntarily. If you agree to certain terms, we can avoid court proceedings. Cooperate how? Undergo a formal capacity evaluation. Allow Brenda to assist with your financial management. Consider transitioning to a living arrangement with more support. You mean assisted living? That would be for the evaluator to determine. And if I refuse? Martin stood, tucked the folder back into his briefcase, and clicked it shut. We file the petition Monday. The court will order an evaluation. If the findings support the petition, conservatorship will be granted, with or without your agreement. Get out. Mr. Calloway, get out of my house. Martin walked to the door, paused, turned. Your daughter loves you, Mr. Calloway. She's trying to protect you. She's trying to control me. He left without another word. The door closed. The house went silent, except for the ceiling fan turning slow overhead and the mockingbird still singing in the magnolia as if nothing had happened. I sat down at the kitchen table and spread the documents in front of me. The medical report. the witness statement, the petition. I lined them up beside the yellow envelope of Vegas photos and stared at the dates. Late June. Brenda contacts Dr. Fleming. Offers money for a false report. July 7th. Fleming writes the report. Late July. Helen's statement collected. Date unclear, but before August. Early August. Martin Beauregard retained. Petition drafted. August 10th. Brenda comes to my house. Takes the locket. August 14th. Sells locket. Flies to Vegas. August 19th. Confrontation at my house. Gaslighting. August 20th. Today, Martin delivers the ultimatum. 6 weeks of preparation. Every move calculated. This wasn't a reaction to my phone call with Doris. This wasn't Brenda scrambling after being caught. This had been planned since June, maybe earlier. The doctor, the neighbor, the lawyer, the petition. Every piece put in place before she ever walked up my stairs and broke into Ruth's jewelry box. She'd built a machine. And the machine was designed to take my life apart. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Found a name I'd seen in Ruth's will, but never called. Will Hartley, attorney at law. Ruth's lawyer, the one who'd handled her estate, her trust, the documents I'd signed without fully understanding because Ruth had said, "Just sign, Ed. I've taken care of everything." I pressed call. 2 rings. Will Hartley. Mr. Hartley. This is Ed Calloway. Ruth's husband. A pause. Then his voice changed. Warmer. More careful. Ed. I've been waiting for your call. My breath caught. You have? Ruth came to me in 2021. Same year she went to Doris. She told me everything, Ed. She left me detailed instructions for when Brenda made her move. He paused. Have you been to the Oak yet? The Oak. The coordinates. The note that said, everything starts there. No, I said. Not yet. A lawyer showed up at my door this morning. Conservatorship petition. They're giving me 7 days. Martin Beauregard. Brenda's been working with him since July, I know. Will's voice was steady, the voice of a man who'd been holding cards for 4 years and was ready to play them. Go to the Oak tomorrow, Ed. Early. What Ruth buried there will lead you to the rest. The rest of what? Everything you need to stop them. Ruth didn't just leave you clues, Ed. She left you an arsenal. I looked at the documents on the table. Martin's ultimatum. 7 days. Monday they'd file. Then a court-ordered evaluation. Then conservatorship. Then Brenda would own everything. My house, my savings, my right to live in my own home, unless I got to the Oak first. Ed, Will said. Bring a shovel. The GPS on my phone read 32.0809, 81.0912. I typed those numbers into the search bar at 5:14 in the morning, sitting in my truck in the driveway with a shovel across the passenger seat and a thermos of black coffee wedged between my knees. The blue dot on the map settled over a patch of green east of Savannah, and the name appeared in small gray letters beneath it. Bonaventure Cemetery. I had buried my wife there 3 years ago. The engine turned over on the second try. I backed out slow, headlights cutting through a fog that hung low over Abercorn Street like wet cotton. Savannah in August before dawn is not a city, it is a steam room with Spanish moss. The air pressed against the windshield thick enough to taste, and I drove with both hands on the wheel because my fingers would not stop shaking. The iron gates of Bonaventure stood open. They are always open. I had learned that the hard way in 2022, the month after Ruth's funeral, when I drove out at 2 in the morning convinced I had forgotten to leave flowers. The caretaker found me asleep against her headstone at sunrise and brought me water without saying a word. His name was Lester. I never forgot that kindness. I parked on the gravel shoulder beside the main path and killed the engine. Silence arrived immediately, the heavy, southern silence that is not really silence at all, but a layered sound. Cicadas warming up, a mockingbird testing its first phrase, the distant hush of the Wilmington River through the trees. I grabbed the shovel, tucked the phone into my shirt pocket with the screen facing out, and started walking. Bonaventure at dawn is a cathedral without walls. The live oaks arch overhead in great dark canopies draped with moss that hangs motionless in the still air. The headstones catch the earliest light in pale flashes, marble angels, granite crosses, iron fences rusted to the color of dried blood. Ruth's grave is in Section H, Row 14, Plot 7. I had memorized those numbers, the way a man memorizes his childhood phone number. Permanently, uselessly, painfully. But the coordinates did not point to her grave. They pointed 230 feet northeast, deeper into the old section where the oaks grow so large their roots have buckled the walking paths into crooked stone waves. I followed the blue dot on my phone, stepping over a root thick as a man's thigh, ducking under a branch that swept low enough to brush my shoulder. The moss left a damp stripe across my sleeve. Then I saw it. The oak was enormous, easily the largest in that section. Maybe the largest in the cemetery. Its trunk measured at least 8 feet across, the bark deeply furrowed and black with age. 3 massive roots radiated outward from the base, like the fingers of a giant hand pressed flat into the earth. Between 2 of those roots, on the south side, someone had placed a small stone round, smooth, about the size of a baseball, and distinctly lighter than anything else on the ground. Ruth had marked it. I knew it the way I knew her handwriting, the way I knew the sound of her laugh from across a crowded room. That stone did not belong there. It was a river stone, pale gray, with a single white band around its middle. We had collected stones like that on our honeymoon in 1976, walking the banks of the Savannah River, filling our pockets until our jeans sagged. She had kept a mason jar of them on the kitchen windowsill for 45 years. One of them was missing from that jar. I had noticed it 3 weeks ago and thought nothing of it. I set the stone aside and pushed the shovel into the earth. The ground was softer than I expected, sandy topsoil mixed with clay, the kind of soil that drains fast after rain. I dug carefully, conscious of the roots, keeping the hole narrow. 6 inches down, the shovel hit something that was not dirt and not rock. A dull metallic sound, like tapping a coffee can with a spoon. I dropped to my knees and cleared the remaining soil with my hands. It was a tin box rectangular, about 10 inches long and 6 inches wide, sealed with waterproof tape wrapped 3 times around the lid. The tape was green. Ruth always used green tape. She bought it in bulk from the hardware store on Drayton Street because she said it matched the shutters on our house, and I had told her that was the most Ruth Calloway reason I had ever heard for choosing tape. I sat on the root of that ancient oak with the tin box on my lap and peeled the tape away strip by strip. My hands were covered in red Georgia clay. My knees were wet. A cardinal landed on a branch above me and watched with its head tilted, and I said out loud, "I found it, Ruth." Inside the box, wrapped in a Ziploc bag, were 4 items. The first was a brass key. Small, flat, stamped with the number 3081 on one side and the words Portland Savings and Trust on the other. A safe deposit box key. The second was a folded sheet of cream stationery, Ruth's personal paper, the kind with her initials R.A.C. embossed at the top. I unfolded it with trembling fingers and read, "Ed, if you're reading this, the locket worked. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry for all of it. Go to Portland Savings and Trust on Bull Street. Box 3081. Everything you need is inside the deed. The recordings, the money, the truth. Don't let Brenda take what we built. Don't let her doctor lie about your mind. You are not sick. You never were. Fight, my love. I already started the war for you. All you have to do is finish it. Yours in every life, Ruth." The third item was a small brown envelope containing $2,000 in $100 bills, emergency cash. enough to hire help or run if things went bad before I reached the bank. The fourth was a photograph. It was the two of us, taken on the porch of our house in 1978, 2 years after the wedding. Ruth was 22. I was 24. She was laughing at something I had said, her head thrown back, the locket already around her neck even then. On the back, in her handwriting, "This is what they're trying to steal. Don't let them." I sat under that oak for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my phone without meaning to. The cardinal left. The sun crested the tree line and sent long gold shafts through the moss. Somewhere beyond the river, a boat horn sounded once, low and mournful, and faded. Then I put everything back into the tin box, tucked it under my arm, and walked to my truck. I had a safe deposit box to open. I had a war to finish. And Ruth, my Ruth, who could not remember my name on the day she died, had already loaded every weapon I would need. Portland Savings and Trust sits on the corner of Bull Street and Perry Lane in a building that has been a bank since 1911. The facade is white limestone darkened by a century of Savannah summers, and the columns flanking the entrance are thick enough that 2 men could not wrap their arms around one. I had driven past it 10,000 times in 49 years of living in this city and never once walked through its doors. I parked the truck at a meter on Perry Lane at 9:47. The tin box from Bonaventure sat on the passenger seat beside the shovel, and I still had red clay on my knuckles. I wiped my hands on my jeans, took the brass key stamped 3081, and crossed the street. The lobby was cool and quiet marble floors, tall windows with frosted glass, a ceiling so high that sounds disappeared upward into it. A young woman at the reception desk looked up and smiled the way bank employees smile. Professionally, briefly, with no teeth. "I need to access a safe deposit box," I said. "Of course, sir. Do you have your key and identification?" I placed the brass key on the counter. She picked it up, read the number, and typed something into her computer. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. She looked at me more carefully. "Box 3081, she said. This box was opened on April 29th, 2021, under the name Ruth Ann Calloway. You are listed as the secondary authorized holder. May I see your driver's license?" I handed it over. She compared the name, nodded, and picked up her desk phone. "Mr. Ellison, I have a secondary holder for box 3081. "Yes, sir." Right away. 3 minutes later, a man in a gray suit appeared from a hallway behind the teller windows. He was about 50, thin, with reading glasses pushed up into thinning brown hair. His name tag read Thomas Ellison, branch manager. "Mr. Calloway," he said, and shook my hand with both of his. "We've been expecting you." That sentence landed in my chest like a stone. "Expecting me?" Mrs. Calloway left specific instructions when she opened the box. She said you would come eventually, and she asked that I personally escort you to the vault. "If you'll follow me." We walked through a heavy door, down a flight of stairs lit by fluorescent panels, and into a corridor lined with brushed steel. The vault door at the end was round, 6 inches thick, and already open. Ellison led me past rows of numbered boxes, small ones near the ceiling, larger ones near the floor, until he stopped at a mid-sized box on the 3rd row from the bottom. 3081, he said. He inserted the bank's master key, then gestured for mine. I pushed it into the second lock and turned. The mechanism clicked with a sound that felt final, like the closing of a chapter. Ellison slid the box out and carried it to a private viewing room. A small space with a table, 2 chairs, and a lamp. He set the box down and stepped back. "Take as long as you need, Mr. Calloway. I'll be outside." The door closed. I sat down. The box was matte gray steel, 18 inches long, 12 inches wide, and 6 inches deep. I lifted the lid. Ruth had organized everything the way she organized everything in our life. Precisely. Logically. with small handwritten labels taped to each item. The first item was a large manila envelope, labeled Deed 14 Tybee Sunrise Lane. Inside was the original property deed for a cottage on Tybee Island, purchased on the 3rd of May 2021 for $185,000 cash. The buyer was Ruth Ann Calloway. The property was paid in full. No mortgage. I had never heard of this address. My wife had bought a beach house without telling me, and she had paid for it with money I did not know we had. Beneath the deed was a white envelope labeled Financial Summary. I opened it and unfolded 2 typed pages. Ruth had liquidated a personal investment account she had maintained since 1994, an account funded by small monthly contributions from her teaching salary at Savannah Country Day School. Over 27 years, the account had grown to $214,000. She had used $185,000 for the cottage and kept $29,000 in a separate savings account at this same bank, also in my name. The account number and access details were written on a yellow sticky note attached to the second page. The third item was a thick envelope labeled, Recordings do not play in public. Inside were 2 USB drives. Each was labeled in Ruth's handwriting. The first read, Brenda and Kevin Kitchen Conversation, the 15th of March 2021. The second read, Dr. Marcus Fleming Office, visit the 2nd of June 2021. The fourth item was a sealed envelope labeled Legal Attorney Will Hartley, Hartley & Associates. Inside was a notarized letter from Ruth, granting Will Hartley power to act on Edward Calloway's behalf in all matters relating to the conservatorship petition, property disputes, and medical fraud claims. It was dated the 30th of April 2021 and co-signed by a notary public named Diane Sutter. The fifth item was the one that broke me. It was a small padded envelope labeled simply, Watch This Last. Inside was a third USB drive, blue, with a strip of masking tape on which Ruth had written, For Ed, when you're ready. I did not have a laptop. I did not have a way to watch it in that room. But I held that blue drive in my palm and stared at it for a long time because I knew what it was. It was Ruth. It was her face. Her voice, recorded sometime in that narrow window between diagnosis and disappearance, when she still had enough clarity to speak directly into a camera and say the things she needed to say before the disease stole her ability to say them. I put everything back into the box, except the deed, the financial summary, the recordings, and the blue drive. Those I placed carefully into the tin box from Bonaventure, alongside the $2,000 in cash and the photograph from 1978. I closed the safe deposit box, locked it, and knocked on the door. Ellison was waiting in the corridor. Mr. Calloway, is everything in order? My wife bought a house, I said. She saved money for 27 years and bought a house and set up recordings and hired a lawyer and hid a key under an oak tree in a cemetery, and she did all of it while her brain was shutting down, and she never told me a single word. Ellison looked at me for a moment. Then he said quietly, She must have loved you very much, sir. I walked up the stairs and out through the marble lobby and into the Savannah heat. The sun hit me like a wall. I stood on the sidewalk with the tin box under my arm and the blue USB drive in my shirt pocket, pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat. I needed a laptop. I needed Will Hartley. I needed to hear my wife's voice one more time before I went to war. I drove to the public library on Bull Street because it was the closest place with a computer and headphones, and because Ruth would have appreciated the irony. She believed libraries were sacred ground. If I was going to hear her voice for the first time since she died, it should be in a place she loved. The Savannah branch of the Live Oak Public Library is a brick building with tall windows and ceiling fans that turn slowly even when the air conditioning is running. I walked in at 11:20 with the tin box under my arm, found an empty computer station in the back corner near the reference section, and sat down. A woman at the next terminal was reading something about gardening. A teenager across the room had headphones on and was bobbing his head to music he thought no one else could hear. I plugged in the library's wired headphones, inserted the blue USB drive into the port, and waited. One file appeared on the screen. It was a video, labeled, "For Ed, the 27th of April 2021. The file size was small, only 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Ruth had always been efficient, even when saying goodbye. I double-clicked the file. The screen went black for a moment, then brightened, and there she was. She was sitting at our kitchen table. I recognized the yellow curtains behind her, the ceramic rooster salt shaker near her elbow, the window that looks out onto the backyard where the magnolia drops its leaves every October. She was wearing her blue cardigan, the one with the missing button on the left cuff that she never replaced because she said it gave the sweater character. Her hair was pulled back. Her reading glasses sat on top of her head the way they always did when she was not using them but did not want to lose them. She looked tired. Not sick. Not yet. Not visibly. But tired in the way a person looks when they have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have decided to set it down. "Ed," she said. I pressed my hand flat against the desk because the sound of her voice went through me like electricity. It had been 3 years. 3 years since I had heard that voice say my name, and the last time she said it, she did not know what it meant. But in this video, recorded 16 months before she died, she knew exactly who I was and exactly what she was doing. "Ed, if you're watching this, then you found the locket, and you found the oak, and you found the box. Which means Brenda did what I knew she would do. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was right." She paused and looked down at her hands. They were folded on the table the way she folded them during parent-teacher conferences when she was about to deliver difficult news about a child. "I need to tell you what I know, and I need you to listen to all of it before you do anything." On March 15th of this year, I heard Brenda and Kevin talking in our kitchen. They didn't know I was in the hallway. Kevin said they needed to get conservatorship over you. He said your mind was going, those were his words. His mind is going, and that if they moved fast, they could control your finances before you noticed. Brenda said she already talked to a doctor, a man named Marcus Fleming, who would write a report saying you showed signs of cognitive decline. Kevin told her the report would cost $4,000. Brenda said it was worth it, because the house alone was worth $400,000. Ruth stopped again. She removed her glasses from the top of her head and set them on the table beside the rooster salt shaker. I recorded that conversation on my phone. The recording is on the first USB drive in the safe deposit box. On June 2nd, I went to Dr. Fleming's office. I wore my church blazer and told the receptionist I was there for a general consultation. When I got into his office, I asked him directly whether he had been contacted about writing a cognitive assessment for Edward Calloway. He said yes. I asked him what the assessment would say. He told me, "Ed." He told me he would write whatever Brenda needed for $4,000. I recorded that conversation too. It's on the second USB drive. She leaned forward slightly, and her voice changed. It became the voice she used when a student had done something dangerous on a field trip. Calm, precise, and absolutely serious. "Ed, listen to me. You are not losing your mind. You never were. They are lying. Brenda is lying. Kevin is lying. And the doctor they hired is lying. I had Dr. Patricia Coleman, our real doctor, the one who has treated us for 22 years, perform a full cognitive evaluation on you last January. You scored perfectly. That evaluation is in Will Hartley's office, notarized and dated. If anyone tries to tell you that you are confused, or forgetful, or incapable, you show them that evaluation. You are the sharpest man I have ever known, and I married you because you were kind and steady, and you never once let me down in 45 years. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. Ruth never cried when other people could see. She saved it for the shower, for the car, for the back porch at night. When she thought I was asleep, I knew because I heard her every time. And I never said anything because she needed that privacy the way she needed air. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctor says the fog will get worse. Some mornings I wake up and I don't know what month it is, and by lunch I'm fine. And by dinner I've forgotten where I put my keys. But I know who you are right now. Today. This minute. You are Edward James Calloway. You are my husband. And I will protect you from our daughter. Even if I have to do it from the grave. She reached forward and the screen went black. 4 minutes. And 11 seconds. I sat in that library chair for a long time. The gardening woman left. The teenager changed his song. A librarian pushed a cart of returned books past my station, and the wheels squeaked on the linoleum. The ceiling fan turned. The world continued doing what the world does, which is move forward without asking permission. I pulled the headphones off, removed the USB drive, and took out my phone. I found the number Will Hartley had given me during our call 2 days ago and pressed dial. He answered on the second ring. Will. It's Ed Calloway. I opened the box. I watched the video. I have everything. The deed, the recordings, the financial documents, all of it. There was a pause. Then Hartley said, How soon can you get to my office? 20 minutes. Bring everything. Every piece of paper, every USB drive, every receipt. We file Monday morning. And Ed, don't answer your phone if Brenda calls. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until we're ready. I hung up, packed the tin box, and walked out of the library into the August heat. The sun was directly overhead now, and my shadow pooled at my feet like a dark puddle on the sidewalk. Somewhere across town, Brenda and Kevin were living their lives, spending money that was not theirs, planning a future built on a lie about my mind. They did not know that my dead wife had spent the last clear months of her life building a case so complete that it would take their futures apart piece by piece. Monday morning was 5 days away. I intended to be ready. Will Hartley's office was on the second floor of a converted townhouse on Drayton Street, 3 blocks south of Forsyth Park. The building had been a dentist's office in the 1960s, a real estate firm in the 80s, and had sat empty for 6 years before Hartley bought it in 2009 and turned it into a 2-attorney practice that handled estates, fraud cases, and the kind of family disputes that decent people pretend do not exist. A brass plaque beside the front door read Hartley & Associates. Est. 2009. There was no associate. Hartley worked alone. Ruth had chosen him for exactly that reason. Fewer people. Fewer leaks. I climbed the narrow staircase with the tin box under one arm and a manila folder in the other. The folder contained the printouts Helen Prescott had helped me compile, the Vegas photographs, the flight estimates, the timeline of Brenda's movements from August 10th through the 18th. The tin box held everything else. The deed, the financial summary, the 3 USB drives, the $2,000 in cash, Ruth's letter from the Oak, and the photograph from 1978. My entire defense fit into a container, the size of a shoebox. Hartley met me at the top of the stairs. He was 63, tall, with a gray beard trimmed close, and hands that looked like they had spent time doing something other than law before they started doing law. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow and no tie. His handshake was firm and brief. Come in, Ed. I cleared the afternoon. His office was a single large room with a wooden desk pushed against the far wall and a conference table in the center that could seat 6. The table was already covered with documents, his own files, pulled from a cabinet he told me Ruth had personally organized during her visit in April 2021. She had come to this office, sat in the chair I was about to sit in, and laid the groundwork for this exact afternoon, 4 years ago. While her brain was dissolving, let's start from the beginning, Hartley said. He pulled a yellow legal pad from a drawer and uncapped a pen. Put everything on the table. Everything. I opened the tin box and laid each item out in a row. The brass key. Ruth's letter. The deed to 14 Tybee Sunrise Lane. The financial summary. The 3 USB drives. The $2,000 in cash. The photograph. Then I added the manila folder, Helen's printouts, the timeline, the Vegas photos. Hartley studied each piece without touching them, the way a surgeon studies an X-ray before making the first cut. Ruth came to me on April 30th, 2021, he said, not looking up. She sat where you're sitting. She told me 3 things. First, that her daughter and son-in-law were planning to file a conservatorship petition against you based on a fraudulent medical report. Second, that she had recordings proving both the conspiracy and the doctor's willingness to fabricate the report. Third, that she was dying not from the Alzheimer's directly, but from what it would take from her, and that she needed someone to hold the evidence until you were ready to use it. He paused and tapped the pen against the pad. She also told me that you would not believe any of it at first. She said you would try to find an innocent explanation for Brenda's behavior, because that is who you are. She said I should be patient with you. I did not respond to that because there was nothing to say. She had been right. Hartley picked up the first USB drive, the one labeled Brenda and Kevin Kitchen Conversation, the 15th of March 2021, and inserted it into a laptop on his desk. He angled the screen so we could both see it and pressed play. The audio was clear. Ruth had placed her phone on the hallway table outside the kitchen, and the voices carried without distortion. Kevin spoke first. His tone was casual, almost cheerful, the way a man sounds when he is discussing a home renovation rather than the theft of his father-in-law's autonomy. If we get the conservatorship locked in by September, we control the accounts, the house, everything. The house alone is worth $400,000 on the East Side market. Brenda's voice came next. Quieter, but steady. Fleming said he'd write the report. Cognitive decline, early dementia indicators, recommendation for supervised financial management, $4,000 for the report, and he'll testify if it goes to hearing. $4,000 is nothing. That's 1% of the house. I know. I already told him yes. Hartley stopped the recording. He wrote something on the legal pad. A date, a name, a dollar figure, and drew a line connecting them. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, he said. Both of them, on tape, discussing payment to a licensed physician for a fabricated medical document. In Georgia, that's a felony. 2 counts minimum, 1 for the conspiracy, 1 for the fraud itself. He inserted the second USB. The recording was different. A conversation in what sounded like a small office. A door closing in the background. A chair creaking. Ruth's voice was composed, almost pleasant. Dr. Fleming, I want to be direct with you. My daughter contacted you about writing a cognitive assessment for my husband. I'd like to know what that assessment will say. Fleming's voice was nasal and hurried. Mrs. Calloway, I've agreed to perform an evaluation based on the family's concerns. You haven't evaluated him. You've never met him. What will the report say? A silence. Then, it will reflect the concerns your daughter has raised. Cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. It's a professional opinion based on family observations. And the $4,000? Another silence. Longer this time. That's a consultation fee. For a report on a patient you've never examined. Fleming did not answer. Hartley stopped the recording. Medical fraud, he said. Georgia Composite Medical Board violation. Loss of license. Minimum. Criminal charges if the DA wants them. And with this tape, the DA will want them. He stood up and walked to a whiteboard mounted on the wall behind his desk. He uncapped a red marker and wrote 3 columns. Brenda, Kevin, Fleming. Under each name, he began listing charges. Under Brenda, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder financial exploitation, theft by conversion of the locket, filing a fraudulent conservatorship petition. Under Kevin, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder financial exploitation, aiding and abetting theft. Under Fleming, medical fraud, fabrication of a medical document, conspiracy, violation of medical licensing statutes. Now, Hartley said, capping the marker and turning to face me. Here's what we file on Monday. First, a motion to dismiss the conservatorship petition, supported by Dr. Patricia Coleman's evaluation from January 2021, showing you in perfect cognitive health. Second, a counter-petition for a restraining order against Brenda and Kevin, prohibiting contact and financial access. Third, a criminal complaint with the Chatham County District Attorney's Office, accompanied by both recordings and your sworn affidavit. Fourth, a formal complaint to the Georgia Composite Medical Board against Dr. Marcus Fleming. He set the marker on the whiteboard ledge and looked at me. Ruth built this case like a prosecutor, Ed. She recorded the evidence, authenticated the documents, hired the attorney, funded the defense, and hid the entire package in a trail only you could follow. I've practiced law for 31 years, and I have never seen anything like it. I looked at the table, the brass key, the letter, the deed, the USB drives, the photograph of a young couple on a porch in 1978, and I understood for the first time the full shape of what Ruth had done. She had not simply left me a box of evidence. She had built a fortress around me, brick by brick, in secret, in silence, while the disease was eating her alive. And she had done it because she knew that the people who were supposed to love me would try to destroy me the moment she was gone. Monday, I said. Monday, Hartley confirmed. 8:30. Chatham County Courthouse. Wear a suit. I drove home in the late August light with the windows down and the tin box on the seat beside me. The oak trees along Victory Drive made a green tunnel over the road, and the Spanish moss hung still in the windless heat. I had 5 days. I had the evidence. I had the lawyer. I had the truth. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead go when they are finished protecting the living, Ruth Calloway was waiting for Monday too. Friday was the worst. Brenda called at 8:15 in the morning, again at 10:40, again at 12:06, and again at 2:30. I let every call go to voicemail. The first 3 messages were sweet, the voice she uses when she wants something, the voice that sounds like her mother's but carries none of the warmth. Daddy, just checking on you. Daddy, I brought some groceries. Are you home? Daddy, Kevin and I are worried. Please call us back. The 4th message was different. The sweetness cracked, and underneath it was something harder. Dad, we need to talk about the house. Martin Beauregard said you missed a meeting about the paperwork. If you don't sign by Wednesday, this gets complicated. Call me. I saved every message. Hartley had told me to save everything. Touch nothing. Respond to nothing. I sat on the back porch with my phone on the railing and listened to each voicemail twice, writing down the time and the exact words in a spiral notebook I had bought at the drugstore on Abercorn Street. The notebook had a blue cover and cost $1.49. Ruth would have approved. She kept spiral notebooks for everything, one for each semester of teaching, stacked in the closet in chronological order from 1990 to 2020. Helen Prescott came over at 4 o'clock with a casserole and a look on her face that said she already knew something was wrong. You haven't left the house all day, she said, setting the dish on the kitchen counter. I can see your truck from my window, and your curtains are closed, which you never do unless you're sick or hiding. I'm not sick. Then you're hiding. She sat down at the kitchen table without being invited, the way only a neighbor of 32 years can sit down. Ed Calloway, I have known you since you and Ruth moved into this house in 1993. You are not a man who hides. Tell me what's happening. I told her the minimum, that I had found evidence, that a lawyer was involved, that something would happen on Monday, and that I could not say more until it was done. Helen studied my face for a long moment, then nodded once. All right. I won't ask again. But I'm bringing dinner every night until Monday. And if that girl shows up at your door, I'm calling the police. That girl. Helen had never liked Brenda. She had told Ruth once, years ago, that Brenda had the kind of smile that apologized for things she hadn't done yet. Ruth had laughed and changed the subject. She never laughed about it again. Saturday was quieter. One call from Brenda at 9 in the morning, no voicemail. One text from Kevin at noon. Ed, we should sit down as a family and talk about next steps. No lawyers needed. Just family. I screenshot the text and emailed it to Hartley. He replied in 4 words. Good. Keep saving everything. I spent Saturday organizing. I cleared the dining room table and laid out every piece of evidence in chronological order, the way Hartley had done on his whiteboard, but with the physical documents. The timeline stretched from March 2021 to August 2025, 4.5 years of Ruth's planning and Brenda's betrayal. Side by side, date by date. The 15th of March 2021. Ruth records kitchen conversation. April 2021. Ruth visits Doris Whitfield, modifies the locket. The 29th of April 2021. Ruth opens safe deposit box, 3081. The 30th of April 2021. Ruth hires Will Hartley. The 3rd of May 2021. Ruth purchases Tybee Cottage. The 2nd of June 2021. Ruth records Dr. Fleming. Summer 2021. Ruth buries tin box at Bonaventure Oak. Then the gap. The long silence. When the Alzheimer's took her piece by piece. Month by month. Until she could not remember my name, and the locket sat untouched on the nightstand because she had forgotten what it meant. The 7th of July 2025. Dr. Fleming writes fraudulent cognitive report. The 7th of August 2025. Helen Prescott's name forged on a witness statement. The 10th of August 2025. Brenda visits, steals the locket, files conservatorship petition. The 14th of August 2025. Brenda sells locket to Doris for $5,000. Flies to Las Vegas. The 18th of August 2025. Doris calls Ed. The 19th of August 2025. Brenda and Kevin gaslight Ed on speakerphone. The 20th of August 2025. Martin Beauregard delivers 7-day ultimatum. August 21, 2025. Ilfins Oak opens box 3081. Watches Ruth's video. Meets Hartley. I stared at that timeline until the evening light turned the dining room gold and then dark. Ruth had started her war in March 2021. Brenda had started hers in July 2025. Ruth was 4 years ahead. Sunday was the day they came to the door. The doorbell rang at 11:15. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Through the window, I saw Kevin's black BMW parked at the curb and Brenda standing on the porch in a yellow sundress, holding a potted orchid the way a person holds a prop in a play. Kevin stood behind her, hands in his pockets, looking at his phone. I did not answer. Brenda knocked, then knocked again, then pressed her face to the sidelight window beside the door, cupping her hands around her eyes to see inside. I stood in the kitchen hallway, out of her line of sight, and did not move. Dad? Daddy, I know you're home. Your truck is in the driveway. Please open the door. We just want to talk. Kevin said something I could not hear. Brenda knocked a 3rd time. Harder. Then Helen's voice cut across the yard from her porch next door, clear as a church bell. Brenda, your father isn't feeling well today. I'd suggest you call before you come by. A pause. Then Brenda's voice, stripped of its sweetness entirely. Mind your own business, Helen. This street is my business. Has been for 32 years. They left. The BMW pulled away from the curb at 11:23. I wrote the time in my notebook. Monday morning arrived. The way important mornings always arrive too early, too bright, with a stillness that makes ordinary sounds feel significant. I woke at 5, showered, and stood in front of the closet looking at the suit I had not worn since Ruth's funeral. Dark charcoal. Single-breasted. Purchased at Levy's. On Broughton Street. In 2014. Ruth had picked it out. She said charcoal made my eyes look serious. I put on a white shirt. buttoned it to the collar, and knotted a navy tie that took me 3 attempts because my fingers would not cooperate. I put on the suit jacket. I placed Ruth's letter, the photograph from 1978, and the locket in my inside breast pocket. The USB drives and all documents were all ready with Hartley. At 7:45, I walked out the front door into the August morning. Helen was standing on her porch with a coffee mug in her hand. She did not say good luck. She did not say, be careful. She raised her mug, nodded once, and went back inside. I drove to the Chatham County Courthouse with both hands on the wheel. The Chatham County Courthouse sits on Montgomery Street, in a building that smells like floor wax and old paper, and the particular kind of silence that exists only in places where people's lives are decided by strangers in black robes. I had been inside it once before, in 1998, for jury duty on a property dispute that lasted 2 days and taught me nothing except that lawyers talk more than they need to. Ruth had packed me a sandwich both mornings. I arrived at 8:14. Hartley was already standing on the steps in a navy suit with a leather briefcase so full it would not close properly. He had a cardboard file box under his other arm, the evidence, organized into tabbed sections, each tab labeled in red ink. He saw me crossing the street and checked his watch. 16 minutes early. Good. Courtroom 4B. Second floor. Judge Caroline Webb. She starts on time. We walked through the metal detectors and up the marble staircase. The hallway on the second floor was wide and bright, lined with wooden benches that had been polished by decades of anxious waiting. A bailiff stood outside 4B with his arms crossed. He nodded at Hartley the way people nod at someone they have seen often enough to recognize but not well enough to like. Hartley stopped me before we entered. Ed, I need you to understand what's going to happen in there. I'm going to present our motion to dismiss the conservatorship. I'm going to enter the recordings, the financial documents, the forged medical report, and Helen Prescott's statement confirming her signature was fabricated. Beauregard will object. Brenda may speak. Kevin will say nothing because Kevin never says anything when the stakes are real. Judge Webb will listen to everything, and then she will make a ruling. Your job is to sit beside me. Answer only when spoken to, and let the evidence do what Ruth built it to do. And if it doesn't work? Hartley looked at me with an expression that was not quite a smile, but lived in the same neighborhood. Ed, your wife spent the last functioning months of her brain constructing a legal case that a team of prosecutors would be proud of. It's going to work. We entered. Courtroom 4B was smaller than I expected. 6 rows of benches behind a low wooden railing. A judge's bench elevated on a platform, 2 tables facing it. Hartley led me to the table on the left and set the file box on the floor beside his chair. The room smelled like wood polish and recycled air. At 8:27 they arrived. Brenda came through the door first, wearing a black blazer and gray slacks, her serious outfit. The one she wore to Ruth's funeral and to the bank when she wanted to look responsible. Kevin followed in a blue suit that did not fit him well across the shoulders, his jaw tight. Martin Beauregard walked behind them, silver-haired and confident, carrying a thin folder that looked almost empty compared to Hartley's box. Brenda saw me and stopped. Her expression went through 3 stages in less than 2 seconds: surprise, then something like fear, then a forced version of concern. She started to speak, but Beauregard put his hand on her arm and guided her to the table on the right. She sat 12 feet away from me. I could smell her perfume. It was the same one Ruth used to wear. She had started using it after the funeral, and every time I smelled it, my chest tightened in a way I could never explain to anyone. Judge Caroline Webb entered at 8:30 exactly. She was 58, with short gray hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She sat down, put on her glasses, and opened a folder. Case number 2025 CV 04417. In the matter of the conservatorship petition for Edward James Calloway, filed by Brenda Calloway Mitchell, Mr. Beauregard. You represent the petitioner? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hartley, you represent the respondent? Yes, Your Honor. And we have filed a motion to dismiss, along with a counter-complaint and supporting evidence. Webb looked over her glasses at Hartley. I've reviewed your filings. They're extensive. Proceed. Hartley stood. He opened the file box and removed the first tabbed section. Your Honor, the conservatorship petition filed by Miss Calloway Mitchell is based on a cognitive evaluation authored by Dr. Marcus Fleming of Savannah, dated July 7, 2025. That evaluation concludes that Edward Calloway exhibits signs of early-stage dementia and recommends supervised financial management. He placed the document on the bench. Then he placed a second document beside it. This is a cognitive evaluation performed by Dr. Patricia Coleman, Mr. Calloway's physician of 22 years, dated January 15, 2021. Mr. Calloway scored in the 97th percentile across all cognitive categories. Dr. Coleman's evaluation is notarized and was performed in a clinical setting over 2 sessions. Beauregard shifted in his chair but did not speak. Furthermore, Your Honor, Dr. Fleming has never met, examined, or spoken with Edward Calloway. Not once. The evaluation is entirely fabricated. Hartley reached into the box and produced a USB drive and a portable speaker. We have a recorded conversation between Dr. Fleming and Ruth Calloway, the respondent's late wife, dated June 2, 2021, in which Dr. Fleming explicitly admits to writing the evaluation in exchange for a $4,000 payment from the petitioner. Webb raised her hand. You want to play that recording in open court? Yes, Your Honor. Objection, Beauregard said, standing quickly. This recording was obtained without Dr. Fleming's consent. Georgia is a one-party consent state. 4. Georgia is a one-party consent state. Period. Hartley interrupted calmly. Mrs. Calloway was a party to the conversation and consented to the recording. It is admissible under O.C.G.A. Section 16.1166. Webb looked at Beauregard. He's correct. Overruled. Play it. The recording filled the courtroom. Fleming's nasal voice, flat and careless, admitting he had never examined me, admitting the report would say whatever Brenda needed, stumbling over the word consultation fee, like a man trying to find a door in a dark room. The recording lasted 91 seconds. When it ended, the courtroom was silent. Brenda was staring at the table in front of her. Kevin was looking at the ceiling. Beauregard was writing something on his legal pad, but his pen was not moving, just pressing into the paper, making a small dark circle that grew wider the longer the silence lasted. Hartley placed the second USB drive on the bench. Your Honor, this is a recorded conversation between the petitioner and her husband, Kevin Mitchell, dated March 15, 2021, in which they discuss the conservatorship plan, the $4,000 bribe to Dr. Fleming, and the intended sale of Mr. Calloway's home for $400,000. He did not play it. He did not need to. He set it on the bench like a grenade, with the pin already pulled, and stepped back. Additionally, the petition includes a corroborating witness statement attributed to Helen Prescott, Mr. Calloway's neighbor of 32 years. Mrs. Prescott has provided a sworn affidavit, stating she never signed that document and never made any statement regarding Mr. Calloway's cognitive health. The signature is forged. He placed Helen's affidavit on the bench. Webb removed her glasses and looked directly at Brenda. Miss Calloway Mitchell, does your attorney wish to respond to any of this? Beauregard stood slowly. He looked at his thin folder, then at Hartley's file box, then at the USB drives on the bench. He looked like a man who had brought a flashlight to a forest fire. Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess to confer with my client. Denied. Sit down, Mr. Beauregard. He sat. Judge Webb put her glasses back on and studied the documents spread across her bench. She read Fleming's report, then Coleman's report, Then Helen's affidavit. She picked up the USB drives, turned them in her hand, and set them down with a precision that told me she understood exactly what they contained. The courtroom was silent, except for the air conditioning humming at a frequency that seemed to live inside my teeth. "Mr. Hartley," Webb said, "your motion to dismiss is based on the argument that the conservatorship petition was filed using fraudulent medical evidence, a forged witness statement, and with the intent to gain unauthorized control over your client's financial assets. Is that a fair summary?" "It is, Your Honor. And you are also requesting a protective order against the petitioner and her husband, as well as a criminal referral to the Chatham County District Attorney." "Yes, Your Honor." Webb turned to Beauregard. "I want to know whether your client disputes the authenticity of the recordings, the cognitive evaluation by Dr. Coleman, or the affidavit from Mrs. Prescott." Beauregard stood and buttoned his jacket. He looked at Brenda. She was sitting with her hands flat on the table, staring at a point on the wood surface that did not exist. Kevin had his arms crossed and his chin raised. The posture of a man who believes silence is the same thing as dignity. "Your Honor, my client maintains that her concerns about her father's well-being were genuine, and that she acted in what she believed." "Mr. Beauregard." Webb's voice did not rise, but it hardened in a way that made the bailiff stand straighter. "I asked whether she disputes the evidence, the recordings, the evaluation, the affidavit." Beauregard looked at his thin folder. He looked at Hartley's file box. He looked at the USB drives on the bench. "No, Your Honor. We do not dispute the evidence." Webb nodded and began writing. She wrote for a long time, long enough that I could hear Brenda breathing. Short and shallow, the way a person breathes before they cry. Kevin uncrossed his arms and crossed them again. Beauregard sat perfectly still. "I'm prepared to rule," Webb said. She looked directly at me. "Mr. Calloway, this court takes the exploitation of elderly citizens with the utmost seriousness. What has been presented today is not a family disagreement. It is a coordinated scheme to defraud a competent adult of his autonomy, his property, and his dignity, using a fabricated medical document and a forged witness statement." She turned to Brenda. "The petition for conservatorship over Edward James Calloway is dismissed with prejudice. It cannot be refiled. The court finds the petition was supported by fraudulent evidence and filed in bad faith." Brenda's fingernails pressed into the wood. "This court grants a protective order. Miss Calloway Mitchell and Kevin Mitchell are prohibited from contacting Edward Calloway by phone, text, email, mail, or in person. You are prohibited from approaching his residence or any property he owns. This order is effective immediately for 12 months, subject to renewal." Kevin whispered something to Beauregard. Beauregard shook his head without looking at him. "I am referring this matter to the Chatham County District Attorney for criminal investigation. The referral includes the recordings, the fraudulent report, the forged statement, and today's findings. I am also directing a complaint to the Georgia Composite Medical Board regarding Dr. Fleming." Webb set her pen down. "Mr. Beauregard, I suggest a candid conversation with your clients about their legal exposure. What was presented today is sufficient for multiple felony charges under Georgia law." She looked at me one last time. "Mr. Calloway, you are free to go. Your autonomy, your property, and your rights are fully intact." The gavel struck once. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Hartley put his hand on my shoulder. "It's done, Ed." I stood. My knees were unsteady, and I gripped the table before I trusted my legs. The weight that had been pressing on my chest since the morning Doris Whitfield called was gone. Not lighter. Gone. As if someone had removed a stone I had carried so long I forgot it was there. I turned and looked at Brenda. She was crying. Not the performative crying from Ruth's funeral, where she dabbed her eyes and leaned on Kevin's shoulder for the cameras. This was the crying of a person who has realized the ground beneath them has opened and there is nothing to hold. Her mascara ran in 2 dark lines down her cheeks. Her mouth was open slightly, and no sound came out. Kevin stared straight ahead, his face empty, the expression of a man whose calculations have all returned zero. I wanted to feel satisfaction. I had imagined this moment during the 5 days of waiting Brenda confronted. The lie dismantled in public. I thought it would feel like victory. It did not. It felt like standing in the wreckage of a house after a storm. Relieved you survived, but unable to stop looking at what was destroyed. She was still my daughter. The girl who sat on my lap at 4 years old and asked me to read the same picture book 11 times. The teenager who called from a gas station at midnight because her car broke down, and I drove 40 minutes in the rain without asking a question. The woman who held my hand at Ruth's grave while they lowered the casket. Somewhere between that girl and this courtroom, something broke inside her that I could not name and could not fix. I picked up the photograph from my breast pocket, Ruth and me on the porch, 1978, and looked at it. Then I put it back, buttoned my jacket, and walked out without speaking. Hartley followed me into the hallway. The marble floor reflected the lights in long white streaks. "What happens now?" I asked. "The DA opens an investigation. Fleming loses his license. Brenda and Kevin face charges within 60 days. Conspiracy, elder exploitation, fraud. If they're smart, they negotiate a plea. And the house? Yours. Always was. No one touches it." I walked down the staircase and out into the Monday heat. The sun was high and white. Traffic moved on Montgomery Street the way it always moves, indifferent, ordinary, unstoppable. I sat in my truck for 7 minutes before starting the engine. I was not crying. I was not thinking. I was sitting in the silence that comes after a very loud thing ends. The silence that is not peace yet, but might become peace if you hold still long enough. Then I drove to Tybee Island. I had a house there I had never seen. The drive from the courthouse to Tybee Island takes 34 minutes if you follow Highway 80 east across the salt marshes and over the bridges where the Savannah River opens its mouth to the Atlantic. I had driven this road 100 times with Ruth Saturday mornings, summer afternoons, New Year's days when the beach was empty and the wind came off the water cold enough to make your eyes sting. She always rolled her window down, even in January. She said the salt air cleaned her lungs. I said it cleaned everything. I crossed the Bull River Bridge at 10:52. The marsh grass stretched flat and gold on both sides, broken only by narrow channels of dark water that reflected the sky like cracked mirrors. A white egret stood motionless in the shallows. The air through my open window smelled like pluff mud and warm salt, the smell of every good memory I had ever made on this stretch of coast. Tybee Island is small, 3 miles long, less than a mile wide. The town has a lighthouse, a pier, a handful of restaurants that serve fried shrimp and sweet tea, and streets with names that sound like someone wrote them while watching a sunset. I turned off Butler Avenue onto a road I had never taken before and followed the GPS to a dead end where the asphalt gave way to a crushed shell lane lined with palmetto trees. The mailbox read 14 Tybee Sunrise Lane. It was painted white with a small blue heron stenciled on the side, the kind of detail that costs nothing but means someone cared enough to put it there. The name on the mailbox was Callaway. I parked the truck and sat looking at the house through the windshield. It was a cottage. Not a mansion, not a showpiece, a cottage. The kind Ruth had circled in magazines for 30 years, with a red pen, and the word someday written in the margin. Single story. White clapboard siding, a wraparound porch with a ceiling painted haint blue, the pale sky color that low country tradition says keeps spirits from entering the house. 2 rocking chairs on the porch, side by side, facing the ocean. A screen door with a wooden frame. A small yard of sea oats and sand that sloped gently down to a low dune. And beyond the dune, the Atlantic flat and silver under the August sun, stretching out to a horizon that had no end. She had bought this house for $185,000 in cash on May 3, 2021. She had never told me. She had never brought me here. She had done it while her memory was failing, while her daughter was plotting against me, while her brain was being erased one synapse at a time. and she had done it so that when the war was over, I would have somewhere to go that no one could take away. I got out of the truck. The shell lane crunched under my shoes. I climbed the 3 porch steps and tried the front door. It was locked. Then I remembered the brass key ring from the safe deposit box had 2 keys, one for box 3081, which I had already used. The second was smaller, older, with a round head and no label. I pulled it from my pocket and slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door opened. The cottage smelled like pine cleaner and sea air. Someone had been maintaining it, Hartley, I assumed, or someone Hartley had hired. The floors were hardwood pale oak, slightly sandy near the doorway, the way beach house floors always are no matter how often you sweep. The living room was small and bright, with 2 windows facing the ocean and white curtains that moved in the breeze from a ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. The furniture was simple. A blue sofa, a reading chair with a floor lamp beside it, a wooden bookshelf half filled with paperbacks mysteries, mostly the kind Ruth devoured on vacation, 1 per day, stacked on the nightstand in neat piles with their spines cracked and their corners turned down. I pulled one off the shelf. Inside the front cover, in pencil, Ruth had written, "Beach House, May 2021. She had stocked the shelves herself. The kitchen was narrow and clean. White cabinets, a gas stove, a window over the sink that looked out onto the backyard, and the dune beyond it. On the counter beside the stove, held in place by a ceramic pelican, was an envelope. Cream stationery. My name in Ruth's handwriting. I opened it standing at the kitchen sink with the ocean visible through the window, and the ceiling fan ticking softly in the next room. "Ed, this is your house now. I bought it because you always said you wanted to hear the waves when you woke up. I bought it because Brenda cannot touch it. It's in your name only. Held in a trust that Will set up. She doesn't know it exists. No one does, except Will, Doris, and now you. The porch faces east. You'll see the sunrise every morning. I picked the rocking chairs myself. The one on the left is yours. The wider one. The one on the right is mine. I know I won't sit in it, but I wanted it there anyway. Live here, Ed. Read books. Eat shrimp. Watch the pelicans. Make friends with the neighbors. Don't spend your time being angry at Brenda. She is broken in a way that is not your fault and not mine, and anger will only keep you tied to her. I loved our life. Every single day of it. Even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones. Ruth, I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I set the envelope on the counter and walked through the rest of the house. The bedroom had a queen bed with a white quilt and 2 nightstands. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub and a window that let in a square of afternoon light. A second bedroom, smaller, empty except for a desk and a chair, faced the side yard where a live oak grew close enough to shade the window in summer. Everything was clean. Everything was ready. She had prepared this house the way she prepared her classroom every August, meticulously, lovingly, with the understanding that someone who needed it would walk through the door. I went back to the porch and sat in the left rocking chair. The wider one was on my right, empty, waiting for someone who would never come. The ocean was 200 yards away, close enough that I could hear the waves if I sat still and let the other sounds, the wind, the fan, the palmetto fronds, fade into the background. The water moved the way water always moves, forward and back, patient and relentless. I rocked the chair once. The wood creaked. A pelican dove into the surf and came up with something silver in its beak. I sat there for a long time, holding Ruth's letter against my chest, watching the tide come in. September arrived the way it always does on the Georgia coast, without permission and without lowering the temperature. The ocean stayed warm through the middle of the month, and I swam in it every morning at 6:15. Walking down the sand path behind the cottage in swim trunks and a pair of rubber sandals, Ruth would have called ridiculous. The water was flat most mornings, barely a wave, just a long, slow roll that lifted me up and set me down like a hand rocking a cradle. I floated on my back and watched the pelicans work the shallows in single file, their wings nearly touching the surface, and I thought about nothing. It was the first time in months I had been able to think about nothing. Hartley called every Tuesday. He kept the updates brief and factual, the way Ruth would have wanted. The first Tuesday in September, he told me the Chatham County District Attorney had opened a formal investigation. A detective named Rosa Gutierrez had been assigned to the case. She had already subpoenaed Dr. Fleming's office records, Brenda's bank statements, and Kevin's financial history going back 3 years. Hartley said Gutierrez was thorough and patient, the kind of investigator who builds a case the way a mason builds a wall, one brick at a time. No gaps. The second Tuesday, Hartley told me Fleming had been suspended. The Georgia Composite Medical Board had reviewed the recordings, compared them with Fleming's billing records, and found that he had submitted a cognitive evaluation for a patient he had never met, examined, or spoken to. His medical license was suspended pending a formal hearing scheduled for November. Hartley said Fleming had hired a defense attorney, a man from Atlanta who charged $600 an hour and specialized in keeping doctors out of prison. It would not matter. The recordings were too clean, and Ruth's voice on them was too clear. The third Tuesday, October had begun. The air was finally cooling. I had started leaving the porch windows open at night and sleeping with the sound of the waves instead of the ceiling fan. Hartley's voice on the phone was different that morning, slower, more deliberate. Ed, the DA is bringing charges. Brenda and Kevin were arrested this morning at their apartment in Savannah. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder financial exploitation, and filing a fraudulent legal document. Kevin has an additional charge aiding and abetting theft by conversion, related to the locket sale and the Las Vegas trip. Bail was set at $50,000 each. I was sitting on the porch when he told me. The left rocking chair. The ocean was gray that morning, the color it turns when a cold front is pushing through, and the wind had shifted to the north for the first time since spring. A shrimp boat was moving slowly along the horizon, dragging its nets through water that looked like pewter. Did they make bail? I asked. Kevin's mother posted his. Brenda is still in custody. She called Beauregard, but he dropped her as a client last week. She's looking for new representation. I did not ask how she looked. I did not ask if she was scared. I wanted to ask. The part of me that was still her father wanted to drive to the Chatham County Jail and sit across from her in one of those rooms with the glass partition and ask her why. Not how, not when, why. Why the locket? Why the doctor? Why the conservatorship? Why she looked at her own father and saw a bank account instead of a person. But Hartley had told me not to contact her, and the restraining order made it illegal regardless. And I knew that even if I could ask, the answer would not fix anything. The fourth Tuesday, Hartley told me Brenda had found a public defender named Alan Sykes. Sykes had reviewed the evidence and immediately contacted the DA about a plea negotiation. Kevin's attorney, his mother had hired one from a firm in Pooler, made the same call the same week. Hartley said this was expected. The recordings left no room for a trial defense. A jury would hear Ruth's voice, and no closing argument in the world could undo what that voice said. I spent October learning the rhythms of the cottage. The hot water took 90 seconds to reach the kitchen faucet. The bedroom door swelled in humid weather and needed a firm push to close. The live oak outside the office window dropped acorns onto the tin roof of the garden shed at unpredictable intervals, each one making a sharp ping that startled me the first week and comforted me by the third. The neighbors to the south were a retired couple named Frank and Dolores Watkins. Frank was 71 and fished from the pier every afternoon. Dolores brought me a pecan pie the second week and did not ask why I was living alone in a house with 2 rocking chairs. I read Ruth's books from the shelf, one after another, in the order she had placed them. Mysteries. All of them. Old ones with yellowed pages and new ones with uncracked spines she must have bought specifically for this shelf. In the margins of some, she had written small notes in pencil. Not about the plot. About me. In a book called The Silent Shore. On page 47, she had written, "Ed would like this character. Stubborn but kind." In another, called Tide Country. On the last page, "Read this one on the porch. Morning. With coffee." I followed her instructions. I read it on the porch. In the morning. With coffee. The pelicans flew past in their single-file line, and the waves made their sound, and Ruth's pencil notes were the closest thing to a conversation I would ever have with her again. Helen Prescott drove out to visit on the third Saturday in October. She brought sweet tea and a bag of pralines from River Street and sat in Ruth's rocking chair without asking, which I was grateful for. We sat on the porch for 2 hours and talked about things that did not matter: the weather, the price of shrimp, a new restaurant on Butler Avenue that Helen said overcharged for crab cakes. She did not mention Brenda. She did not mention the courthouse. She looked at the ocean the way people look at the ocean when they have lived long enough to understand that it does not care about your problems and that this is precisely why it helps. Before she left, she stood at the porch railing and looked out at the water. "Ruth picked a good house, Ed. She always did." Helen drove away at 4 o'clock. I washed the glasses, put the leftover pralines in the ceramic jar on the kitchen counter, and went back to the porch. The sun was dropping toward the marsh behind the island, and the sky was turning the color of peach skin. A pelican sat on the nearest piling, watching me with one eye, perfectly still. Hartley had said the plea hearings would be scheduled for late November. The legal system was grinding forward, steady and mechanical, doing what Ruth had designed it to do. I rocked the chair and waited. The plea hearings took place on November 19th, at the Chatham County Courthouse. The same building. The same second floor. A different courtroom. Courtroom 2A this time. Larger. More people. A court reporter with a machine that clicked like an insect every time someone spoke. Hartley and I sat in the gallery, not at the table. We were not parties to the criminal case. The state of Georgia was. The prosecutor was a woman named Catherine Holloway. Mid-40s. Dark hair pulled back. The kind of voice that fills a room without rising. She had reviewed every recording, every document, every receipt and timeline that Ruth had assembled, and she had told Hartley privately that in 19 years of prosecution, she had never received a case so thoroughly prepared by a civilian. A dead civilian. At that, Brenda entered the courtroom in a gray jumpsuit and handcuffs. Her hair was unwashed. Her face was thinner than the last time I had seen her. And the lines around her mouth had deepened in a way that made her look more like Ruth than she ever had before. That resemblance hit me in a place I was not prepared for. And I looked away. Kevin came in separately, also in a jumpsuit, also cuffed. He did not look at me. He did not look at anyone. He stared at the floor. The way a man stares at the floor, when he has realized that the floor is the only thing in the room that will not judge him. The charges were read. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Elder financial exploitation. Filing a fraudulent legal document. Kevin's additional count. Aiding and abetting theft by conversion. Each charge carried its own weight, its own maximum sentence, its own specific language that reduced what they had done to my family into words. A court could measure and a judge could punish. Alan Sykes, Brenda's public defender, stood and entered her plea. Guilty on all counts. The word came out of his mouth, not hers. She sat with her hands folded on the table and her eyes closed. Kevin's attorney entered the same plea. Guilty on all counts, including the additional charge. Kevin nodded once. A small, mechanical movement, like a man agreeing to something he had already agreed to a long time ago. Judge Robert Aarons, not Webb this time. A different judge for the criminal case, accepted both pleas and moved to sentencing. Holloway recommended 18 months for Brenda, 12 for Kevin, plus restitution and community service. The defense attorneys requested leniency. Judge Aarons considered both sides for approximately 4 minutes. Brenda received 14 months in a state facility, 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution of all funds obtained through the scheme, the $5,000 from the locket sale, the $4,000 paid to Fleming, and court costs totaling $8,600. Kevin received 10 months, 2 years of probation, 150 hours of community service, and joint responsibility for the restitution. Fleming's hearing at the medical board had concluded the previous week. His license was permanently revoked. He was additionally charged with 1 count of medical fraud and entered a plea of no contest. He received 2 years of probation and a $15,000 fine. He would never practice medicine again. When the gavel fell, Brenda opened her eyes and looked at me for the first time. Across the courtroom, across the gallery railing, across everything that had happened between us since the morning she took the locket from the nightstand. Her mouth opened as if she was going to speak. Then it closed. A bailiff touched her elbow, and she stood and was led through a side door that locked behind her with a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. I left the courthouse with Hartley. We shook hands on the steps. He told me the case was effectively closed, that the restitution payments would be managed through the court, and that I should call him if I ever needed anything. I thanked him. He walked to his car. I walked to my truck. Then I drove to Bonaventure Cemetery. The oak was the same. Of course it was. Oaks do not change. In 3 months, they barely change. In 3 centuries. The roots still radiated outward. The moss still hung motionless. The hole I had dug in August had been filled in by rain and time, and the earth over it was smooth again, as if nothing had ever been buried there. I walked past the oak to Section H. Row 14. Plot 7. Ruth's headstone was simple gray granite, the kind she would have chosen herself, no angels, no poetry. Just her name. The dates, and a single line I had picked because it was the truest thing I could say, in 8 words. She loved deeply and planned ahead. I took the photograph from my jacket pocket, the one from 1978, 2 young people on a porch, laughing at something neither of them remembered. A locket around her neck that would not reveal its secret for another 43 years. I leaned the photograph against the base of the headstone and held it in place with the river stone from the oak. The same stone she had taken from the mason jar on our windowsill. It had traveled from the Savannah River in 1976 to our kitchen to the cemetery oak to my pocket and now back to her. A circle closed. I stood there for a while. The November air was cool for the first time since spring, and the light through the oaks was thin and gold. A mockingbird sang from somewhere I could not see. The cemetery was empty except for me and the dead. And the dead were quiet. And the quiet was enough. I drove back to Tybee Sunrise Lane as the sun was setting. The sky over the marsh turned amber, then rose, then a deep violet that bled into the ocean at the horizon. I parked the truck, climbed the porch steps, and sat in the left rocking chair. The right chair was empty. It would always be empty. But the wind coming off the Atlantic moved through it gently, rocking it a 1/4 inch forward and a 1/4 inch back. And if I did not look directly at it, I could almost believe someone was sitting there. Inside the cottage, on the bookshelf, the next unread paperback waited. Ruth had written something in the margin, I did not know what yet. Tomorrow morning, I would find out. I would make coffee, sit on this porch, open the book, and read whatever she had left for me in pencil, between the lines of someone else's story. The waves came in. The waves went out. The pelicans flew their last pass of the day, in a line so straight and low, they seemed to be stitching the water to the sky. I rocked the chair once and closed my eyes. Yours in every life, Ruth.